Hey guys, tonight we find ourselves walking into the soft haze of a late summer dawn, the kind of dawn that makes every leaf shine with a silvery dew, and every wood smoke plume from a thatched roof drift slowly into the pale blue sky. You can almost smell it, moist earth baking rye bread, and the faint tang of last night's campfire. It's the Middle Ages, and you're the one somehow in charge of a tiny settlement that's little more than a scattering of timber cottages, a couple of muddy tracks, and a few stubborn villagers who will look to you for work, food, and protection. It sounds quaint now, but let's be honest, without planning, you probably won't survive this. The wolves won't care about your enthusiasm, and the seasons won't pause so you can figure out crop rotation. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And while you're here, tell me in the comments where in the world you are listening from and what time it is for you right now. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You wake to the slow rhythm of medieval life, which is to say the rooster's insistent crow, the heavy creak of cartwheels somewhere down the lane, and the faint chatter of two women fetching water from the stream. You stretch dress in your scratchy wool tunic and step outside into a world that is both raw and beautiful, unforgiving yet oddly peaceful. Your villagers are beginning their day, some with purpose, others with the kind of distracted shuffling that means you'll need to check in on them before they decide the morning is best spent leaning on fence posts. In the earliest days, efficiency isn't about advanced schedules or elaborate buildings. It's about survival. Every able-bodied villager must work, and every task must matter. You scan the village square. Yakub the carpenter is already planning rough boards for the new pigsty. He doesn't need prodding. But down by the half-collapsed fence, Tomasz is leaning against a post, idly flicking pebbles into the mud. That will not do, you call to him, voice carrying across the quiet yard. He straightens, shuffles over, and you hand him a hoe pointing toward the weedy patch of barley. There's no grand speech. Your authority is built in the everyday rhythm of giving clear orders and expecting them carried out. In a game like Medieval Dynasty, this translates into making sure villagers have defined jobs and the tools they need. Tools break. People get distracted. If you aren't checking their progress, production drops quietly, like sand through a loose-woven basket. You're not a tyrant, but you are the only one here who sees the whole picture. The village itself is small, half a dozen buildings. Your house, a couple of simple homes for settlers, a workshop, a food storage shed, and that nearly finished pigsty. You know more will come: fields, barns, hunting lodges, but right now these are the beating heart of your community. Your first real job is to make sure each building has a purpose, and that someone is assigned to it. A building without a worker is just a drain on your wood supply and a silent accusation of poor planning. As the sun edges higher, you make a slow circuit through the settlement. You check firewood levels, still enough for a few days, but winter will demand far more. You note the food store's smoked fish bread, a few turnips, and the precious sack of dried peas. Enough for now, but the fields must be tended if you're to see spring in good health. You peek into the workshop where old Marta is repairing tools. She works slowly but steadily, her hands worn yet capable. You ask after the progress of sickles for the harvest, and she assures you they'll be ready by week's end. Efficient management in these early days is really about spotting the gaps before they become crises. A single missing sickle at harvest time could mean crops rotting in the fields. A shortage of warm clothes before the first frost could mean losing workers to sickness. You make mental notes, turning them into actions, assigning someone to gather flax for linen, ensuring the hunter brings in enough hides for winter garments. By mid-morning, you've already done more walking than you'd like, but that's the life of a medieval manager. Your job is mostly in your feet and your eyes. You pass the smithy where Andre is hammering out nails, sparks jumping in the gloom. You linger just long enough to remind him that the barn repairs will need hinges soon. He grunts in acknowledgement, sweat dripping from his brow. Here reminders are as much about solidarity as supervision workers see you're engaged, and that keeps them engaged in turn. Beyond the last cottage, the fields roll gently toward the tree line. The barley patch Tomasz is weeding looks better already, though he's moving at the pace of an aging ox. Still, progress is progress. You pause, breathe in the scent of crushed green stalks, and imagine what this will look like come harvest, golden waves bowing in the autumn wind. It's enough to make the blisters worth it. Efficiency, you realize, isn't only about assigning labor. It's about morale. Villagers work better when they see the village growing stronger, safer, richer. So you make small, visible improvements, mending fences where livestock roam, keeping pathways clear, planting a few extra rows of cabbages where everyone can see them thrive. These touches reassure people they're in a community that cares, which in turn makes them care more about their work. At the well, two young women are talking as they haul up buckets, their laughter ringing out over the splash of water. You step over, ask how the water table is holding, and hear that it's been steady despite the dry spell. You praise their diligence and remind them to keep an eye on the ropes and pulleys. Small things break quietly and without warning. If the well goes dry or the bucket rope snaps in winter, it will be far more than an inconvenience. By noon, the village hums with the muted industry of a place finding its rhythm. Chickens scratch near the granary, a child chases a dog through the grass, and somewhere a lute plucks a wandering tune. You take a moment to stand in the shade of your porch, watching the life you've shaped begin to coalesce. This is why you manage to turn scattered effort into steady, quiet productivity. And yet you're mindful one day of order does not guarantee the next. A sudden storm could flatten crops. Illness could sweep through the cottages. A predator could raid the henhouse. So you plan redundancies, store more food than you think you'll need, keep spare tools, rotate hunting grounds, so game isn't driven away. Efficiency is never about doing the bare minimum. It's about preparing so thoroughly that surprises have little bite. The afternoon stretches ahead, and you know it will bring more rounds of checks, more nudges to keep idle hands busy, more mental lists of what needs doing tomorrow. But for now, you sip from a wooden cup of weak ale, letting the taste settle on your tongue as you listen to the heart of the village beating steady in the summer heat. The day is far from over, but you've set it moving in the right direction. You've given shape to the hours, and in a place like this that is no small thing, the real work you suspect will come when the seasons turn. But for now, the sun is warm, the villagers are working, and you've managed, just for a morning, to keep the fragile balance of medieval life from tipping into chaos. The hum of the day is like a low lullaby, and though you'd never admit it to the others, part of you could almost drift to sleep right here in the heart of your well-managed little world. The late afternoon sun slants low across the fields, throwing long shadows between the cottages. You've learned that this is the time of day when focus tends to wander. The work that began brisk and purposeful after breakfast now moves in slower arcs. Tools clink less often. The voices of your villagers grow softer, punctuated by the occasional sigh. Your job, however, is to keep that slow decline from becoming a full collapse before dusk. You walk toward the workshop again. Inside, the smell of sawdust and resin fills the dim air. Yakub is still at his bench, though now he's sanding rather than planing. The rhythm of his strokes has slowed, and you know the fatigue of the day is settling in. You place a hand on his shoulder, not heavy but firm enough to remind him the day's not done yet. He nods without looking up, the grit of sandpaper rasping against pine. From there, you make for the pigsty. The structure stands solid now, the fresh timber still pale where the bark was stripped away. It will hold a pair of pigs soon, which means you'll have another layer of responsibility, feeding, breeding, protecting. You run your hand along the smooth rail of the pen, imagining the snuffling creatures that will one day root here. Livestock will mean more meat and more manure for the fields, but also more mouths to feed. Balance, always balance. Down the lane you see Tomasz trudging toward the woodpile, an armful of kindling stacked against his chest. He catches sight of you and straightens up, perhaps eager to look busier than he feels. You don't call him out. Instead, you make a mental note. Tomasz does better with short, specific tasks. Give him a broad order like prepare the fields, and he drifts. Tell him weed the northern barley plot, and he'll do it eventually. Efficiency means knowing who you're working with and matching the work to their temperament. Near the communal garden, old Marta has paused her sewing to stretch her back. She squints against the sun, smiling faintly when she sees you approach. You ask how the mending goes, and she gestures toward a neat stack of repaired tunics. The work is good, tight stitching, strong seams. She mentions that the supply of good thread is running low. Another note for the mental ledger barter for thread before the cold sets in. Every repair done now is one less shivering villager later. Past the well, a cluster of children chase a rag-stuffed ball. Their shrieks carry on the breeze, a reminder that tomorrow's workers are today's distractions. You don't stop them. There's value in play even in the Middle Ages. A village without laughter becomes brittle, its people prone to despair. Still, you remind the older boy to fetch water for his mother before supper. Small acts keep the household wheels turning. As the sun dips lower, the shadows grow heavier under the eaves. You know the light will be gone soon, and with it the villagers' will to labor. The medieval day ends early by necessity. Candles are precious, and darkness brings dangers. You begin making your evening rounds a ritual of checking, securing, preparing. You stop at the food storage shed, inspecting the bins of grain and sacks of dried peas. The air inside is cool and still smelling faintly of earth. You run your fingers over the tops of the containers, feeling for any sign of rodent intrusion. None yet, but a single breach could undo weeks of work. You pass the hen house, leaning in to listen for the low cluck of settling birds. A healthy flock means steady eggs, but they also draw the attention of foxes and martens. You check the latch on the door, testing it twice. In your world, negligence doesn't just cost money, it costs life. From the hilltop behind your house, you can see the whole village laid out in miniature. Thin threads of smoke drift from chimneys. A few figures still move in the fields, bent silhouettes against the reddening sky. It's a sight that stirs something in you, not pride exactly, but a deep awareness of your role in this fragile machine. You are the spindle around which all these threads are wound. Without your hand, the weave unravels quickly. You recall the first days here when buildings were scarce and the work endless. Back then, survival meant swinging the axe yourself, fetching every bucket of water, turning every sod. Now you've learned that real leadership is not about doing everything. It's about ensuring everything is done. The distinction is subtle but vital. You manage time, energy, and resources like a miser counting coins. As the last light drains from the sky, you gather the villagers in the square. Not a formal assembly, just a moment to share what's been done and what's ahead. You praise Yakub for finishing the pigsty framework. You note Marta's repairs, Tomash's work in the barley patch. Then gently, you remind them of tomorrow's priorities, securing the thatch on the granary roof, bringing in more firewood, checking the traps in the northern woods. Clear direction now means fewer wasted hours come morning. After the small crowd disperses, you walk the perimeter of the village. It's not a fortress, just a scattering of cottages and outbuildings, but you keep an eye out for anything amiss. A fence rail knocked loose, a trail of footprints too close to the henhouse. A light frost is possible tonight. You smell it in the air, that faint metallic tang that comes before a cold snap. You pull your cloak tighter and quicken your steps. Back at your own cottage, the hearth crackles with low flames. You drop onto the bench by the fire, rubbing the day's ache from your knees. On the table, a simple meal waits: coarse bread, a wedge of cheese, a clay cup of thin ale. You eat slowly, watching the play of firelight against the timber walls. This, too, is part of efficiency, knowing when to rest. Burn yourself out, and the village loses its center. Outside, the night deepens. An owl hoots from somewhere in the trees. You think of the hunters who will be up before dawn to set their snares and scan the snow-dusted paths for fresh tracks. In their hands lies much of the winter's meat supply. You make a note to check their equipment tomorrow. No trap works if the spring is rusted or the bait spoiled. Your mind drifts to the bigger picture. Fields will need expansion come spring. The pigsty will demand feed and bedding. Perhaps another family will arrive, drawn by the promise of safety and work. If they do, you'll need another cottage, another set of hands, and another mouth to feed. Growth brings strength, but also complexity. Efficiency must scale with size, or else collapse follows quickly. You stare into the fire, letting the warmth seep into your bones. Outside, the village sleeps, but you, in the quiet space between one day and the next, are already shaping the hours to come. You picture the grain stores swelling the livestock, thriving the villagers busy from dawn to dusk. You imagine pathways packed hard by steady feet, roofs tight against the weather, laughter at the well even in winter. There's comfort in this vision, though you know it will take constant tending. A medieval settlement does not run on momentum alone. Every day must be guided, adjusted, watched. Every hand must find its work. Every gap must be filled before it becomes a crack. The embers glow low. You rake them gently, banking the fire for the night. Tomorrow the rooster will crow again, and you'll rise to repeat the cycle. Observe, assign, encourage, correct. Some days will bring triumph, a full granary, a bountiful hunt. Others will bring challenge storms, sickness, lean harvests. But each will demand the same: a steady hand, an eye for detail, and the patience to see the long game. You lay down on your pallet, the faint rustle of straw beneath the blanket. The sounds of the village fade into a hushed stillness. In that stillness, you understand something simple but profound: efficiency. Here is not about speed. It's about constancy. It's the quiet, steady turning of the seasons and the human hands that keep the wheel from wobbling. The rooster calls before the first rim of light brushes the eastern hills. You rise before most of the village, pulling on your wool tunic and boots, while the world still lies in a mist-softened half-darkness. This early hour is yours, a time to set the tone before the day's small urgencies start pecking at your attention. Stepping outside, you breathe in air that's cold enough to sting your lungs. The grass crunches faintly underfoot, kissed with a light frost that glitters in the moon's last silver. Smoke seeps lazily from your chimney, and somewhere beyond the barns a dog barks once, then falls silent. You make your way to the village square, scanning for any change since last night. The henhouse door remains latched. No fresh paw prints mar the frost near the granary. All is as it should be. In Medieval Dynasty and in the reality, it mirrors the most efficient managers are watchers, first actors, second. You don't rush to start swinging a hoe or hammer. You check the conditions, you notice the patterns. A cracked fence rail might not seem urgent at dawn, but you know the fox that tests the gap at midnight will think otherwise. You make a mental note, fix that before dusk. The first stirring comes from Marta's cottage. She appears wrapped in a heavy shawl, a basket looped over one arm, eyes still half closed. She's heading for the food store to begin preparing breakfast rations for the hunters. You greet her softly, asking after her joints. She grumbles about the cold, but there's a smile in it. People work better when they feel seen, not just as workers, but as whole human beings. You know this, so you make these moments part of your morning rounds. Soon, Jakub emerges, rubbing his beard with one hand and carrying an axe in the other. He nods toward the forest edge. The woodpile needs replenishing before the snow thickens. You agree, but caution him to keep an eye out for wolves. Winter hunger drives them closer to human dwellings. Jakub grunts his understanding and sets off at a slow, purposeful stride. The hunters appear next, bows slung across their backs, traps bundled in rope. You remind them to rotate their hunting grounds. Take too much from one glen, and you'll drive the game away for months. They nod, used to your advice by now. Efficiency in the wild means restraint as much as effort. Overhunt today and you'll starve tomorrow. By the time the rest of the village stirs, the sky has shifted from blue-gray to pale gold. Chickens cluck in their pen. Children stumble sleepily toward their morning chores, and the low murmur of voices begins weaving through the air. You gather a few key villagers to discuss the day's work. Jakub will focus on splitting logs. Tomasz on clearing stones from the north field. Marta on weaving linen strips for repairs. The younger women on tending the communal garden. Assignments made early keep confusion and excuses at bay. With orders given, you set out toward the north field. The soil here is rough, littered with stones that strain plow and root alike. Tomasz is already at work, prying a rock from the frozen earth with a grunted curse. You kneel beside him, showing a more efficient angle for the pry bar. He follows your example, and the stone comes free with less effort. Efficiency isn't just about assigning work. It's about making sure the work is done in the smartest way possible. One bit of guidance today saves countless wasted hours tomorrow. From the field, you walk to the granary roof. Last night's frost has left the thatch stiff, the edges brittle. You run your hand over it, noting spots where the weave has loosened. If left untended, snow will slip into these gaps, rotting the grain beneath. You fetch a ladder and call to Andrzej the smith. He climbs up beside you, and together you weave fresh thatch into the weak spots. It's slow work, but when it's done, you know the grain is safe. Preventive care is invisible until the day it saves you. Back on the ground, you spot Marta near the well. She's shaking her head at the rope frayed halfway through. You kneel, inspecting the wear. The fibers are splitting. One hard tug could send the bucket crashing. You replace it immediately with a length of hemp rope you've kept for emergencies. Efficiency often means having the replacement before the failure. You'll set someone to braiding a spare before the week is out. The sun climbs, warming the air enough that frost retreats to the shadowed edges of fences and huts. From the forest, the ring of Yakub's axe carries clear, steady. In the garden, the women work in quiet conversation, pulling up the last of the leeks before the soil hardens for good. You stop to help them bundle the harvest, your fingers clumsy in the cold earth, but your presence a reminder that no work is beneath you. Leaders who labor alongside their people earn more than obedience, they earn trust. Near midday, the hunters return. One carries a brace of rabbits, another a pheasant whose feathers still gleam with morning dew. You praise their work, then send them to skin and prepare the meat before it spoils. You watch as the rabbits are deftly gutted, and hung in the cool shade the pheasant plucked clean. Every step is part of the chain that keeps the village alive. Neglect one link and the whole chain weakens. You take a moment to rest in the square, gnawing on a hunk of bread, while watching the villagers move through their tasks. The sight is reassuring, no one idle, no tool lying unused, no building standing empty. This is efficiency in motion, not frantic, but steady, purposeful, self-sustaining. It's the kind of rhythm that will carry you through hard months if you protect it. After your bread, you check the woodpile. Yakub has made good progress, neatly split logs stacked waist-high. You thank him and remind him to cover the pile before evening dew can dampen the wood. A wet log burns poorly, and in winter every spark matters. He wipes sweat from his brow, nodding in agreement. The afternoon brings a light snow, just a dusting, that melts on contact with warm hands and rooftops. Still, it's a reminder that time is short. You quicken your rounds, checking that the traps in the northern woods have been set, that the new rope on the well holds firm, that the granary remains sealed tight. Each inspection is a quiet conversation between you and the future. Will this hold when the real cold comes? Near the pigsty, you find Tomasz again, this time hauling a barrow of manure toward the fields. It's foul work, but vital. You walk with him a stretch, talking about which furrows will need the most fertilizing. He listens more intently now than in the barley patch. Perhaps the concrete weight of the wheelbarrow sharpens his focus. Or perhaps he's simply found his rhythm for the day. As the pale afternoon light fades, you gather the villagers once more. Briefly, you acknowledge the day's progress, the woodpile's growth, the repaired granary roof, the safe well rope, the day's catch of game. You note tomorrow's aims, more firewood, more stone clearing, the completion of a new shed for storing fodder. Clear communication is the oil that keeps this medieval machine turning. Evening settles in like a heavy blanket. Smoke from the chimneys mingles with the smell of roasting meat and baking bread. You walk the perimeter again, eyes sharp for anything out of place. The fence rail you noted this morning still needs fixing. You drive a wedge into the gap and lash it tight. A fox won't slip through tonight. Back in your cottage, you warm your hands by the hearth. The day's aches throb gently in your shoulders. But it's a good ache, the ache of work done and a village kept safe. Outside, the last light dies, replaced by the quiet, watchful dark. You know the wheel will turn again tomorrow, and you'll be there to keep it true. The pale light of dawn arrives slower today, filtered through a thin veil of mist that clings to the hollows and curls like breath between the cottages. You rise quietly, pulling your cloak tight as you step outside. The air feels different, cooler, sharper, with that muted hush that tells you the first real snow isn't far off. Somewhere in the forest, a woodpecker taps at a trunk, the sound echoing faintly through the stillness. You make your way to the woodpile first. Yesterday's effort shows the stack is taller now, covered neatly with a sheet of oiled cloth to keep out the damp. You run your hand along the smooth-cut faces of the logs, reassured. But you also know that one good blizzard could eat through this supply faster than you'd like. Firewood is never enough until winter is over. From there, you check the granary again. The repairs to the thatch have held. The frost-hardened stalks still weave tight. No signs of moisture inside, no spoor of mice. You close the heavy door, the iron latch clinking into place. Food security is not something you trust to luck. At the well, the new rope hangs firm and smooth in your hands. You lower the bucket slowly, listening for the hollow slap of water far below. When you haul it up again, the water is cold and clean, a mirror that catches the faint light of the rising sun. You smile satisfied and set the bucket by the stone lip for Marta, who will be by soon to start her morning work. In the quiet, you take a slow walk to the edge of the north field. The soil there is stiff now, flecked with frost, like scattered glass. Tomasz is already there, his breath a white cloud, prying loose the last stubborn stones before the ground locks solid. He works with more purpose than usual. Perhaps the chill has woken him fully, or perhaps he's begun to understand that every stone removed today is one less obstacle for spring planting. You offer a brief word of encouragement, then leave him to it. Your path takes you toward the forest's edge where Jakub is splitting logs. His swings are measured and strong, each one splitting the wood clean in two. The rhythm is almost hypnotic thwack, crack, slide, stack. You stand a moment watching. This is efficiency not born of speed, but of perfect, practiced movement. No wasted motion, no unnecessary strain. You'll remind the younger men to watch Jakub's technique. It will save their backs in the long run. Near the clearing, you spot the hunters returning earlier than expected. One carries a brace of hares, another a fox pelt. The catch is modest, but in these lean months, every scrap of protein matters. You thank them for their work and remind them to rotate their traps again tomorrow. Game is skittish in this season. Overhunt one trail and you'll be staring at empty snares for weeks. By mid-morning, the mist has thinned, revealing a pale sky streaked with high clouds. In the communal garden, the last leeks have been pulled, bundled, and carried to storage. The earth lies bare now, waiting for the long sleep of winter. You pause to scatter the few remaining seeds of winter rye into a small plot, more an experiment than a real crop. Sometimes a hardy green will sprout early, come spring, giving a bit of fresh taste to meals still heavy with dried peas and root vegetables. You stop by Marta's cottage, ducking your head to enter the dim interior. She's seated by the hearth, weaving linen strips into makeshift bandages and repair patches. Her hands move with the surety of decades. She tells you the thread you traded for last week is holding up well. You know she'll keep at this quietly until the pile beside her is gone. In this way, some tasks are like slow-burn fires. They never flare bright, but they keep the hearth warm all the same. A sudden commotion draws you back outside. Near the henhouse, a pair of boys are shouting and waving their arms. You hurry over, heart tightening, only to find a loose hen flapping indignantly across the yard. One of the older women catches it by the wings, clucking louder than the bird itself, and tucks it under her arm. The cause is quickly found a small gap at the bottom of the fence, loosened where the frost has heaved the earth. You kneel, driving a stake deep into the ground and lashing it tight. Simple problems caught early stay simple. Around midday, you walk the village with your mental list, check the traps, inspect the new fodder shed, see if the well pulley needs greasing. Ask Jakub how much wood he's still to split. Every answer is a small piece of the puzzle. The fodder shed is nearly done, its frame solid and roof snug. Jakub says he'll finish the wood pile by week's end. The pulley is still smooth, but you'll oil it anyway. Maintenance delayed becomes repair later. The hunters head out again after a quick meal, taking different paths this time. You watch them disappear into the frost-rimmed trees, their bows slung low boots crunching on frozen leaves. You know the forest well enough to trace their routes in your mind, the way they loop through the gullies and along the ridges. Theirs is a quiet, dangerous work, and you make a note to check their catch before dusk, both for safety and to keep the stores balanced. Later you sit with Tomasz as he sharpens his hoe by the fire pit. The steel sings softly against the whetstone. You talk about next year's planting, where the barley will go, whether to expand the cabbages or try beans again. He listens more than he speaks, but you can tell he's weighing the options. You've learned that involving villagers in these choices makes them take more ownership in the work ahead. Efficiency grows when people feel the outcome belongs to them. By afternoon, a pale sun struggles weakly through the clouds. Shadows lengthen early in this season, so you begin your evening checks sooner. You stop at the granary again, secure. The woodpile covered, the henhouse latched. You run your hand along the fence line, feeling for any weakness. The repaired gap holds firm. Beyond the fence, the frost-stiff grass whispers under your boots. The hunters return just as the light begins to fail their packs, a little heavier this time. A pheasant, another hare, and a fine pelt from a young fox. You praise their skill, then send the catch to be cleaned and stored. The meat will go into the smoking shed tonight to be ready for the weeks ahead. As the village gathers for the evening meal, you notice the easy rhythm of voices, the way people move around each other without fuss. This is what you've been building, a pattern of work and rest, of shared effort and shared reward. The bread is coarse, the ale thin, but there's laughter in the air, and that is worth as much as any feast. After the meal, you make one last slow walk around the square. The windows of each cottage glow faintly, firelight flickering against the cold. Smoke hangs low, caught in the still air. In the distance, the forest stands dark and watchful. But tonight, the village feels like a small, sturdy island of warmth in a wide, indifferent land. Back in your cottage, you ease into your chair by the hearth. The flames dance lazily, their crackle blending with the soft murmur of voices fading into the night. You close your eyes for a moment, letting the heat seep into your chilled fingers. Outside, the frost is already forming again, knitting delicate lace across every surface. Tomorrow you'll rise and tend to it all again. The wood, the grain, the game, the fences. The work is endless, but so is the quiet satisfaction that comes from keeping it all in balance. Morning creeps in with a pale wash of light over the hills. The sky a soft slate blue streaked with thin ribbons of cloud. You stir before the rooster's second call, knowing that the day ahead will be one of preparation rather than immediate urgency. These are the kinds of days you treasure, the ones where you can tend to the slow, quiet work, that builds a village's resilience. The air bites at your cheeks as you step outside. Frost powders the thatch roofs, sparkling faintly before the sun climbs high enough to melt it. Your boots crunch on the hard ground as you make for the square. Already you see a wisp of smoke curling from Marta's chimney. She's always among the first to rise. The smell of baking bread rides the cold air, mingling with the faint tang of wood smoke. You start the day by checking the woodpile, running your hands over the smooth-cut faces of the logs. The stack is taller than yesterday. Jakub has been diligent. Still, you take a mental note to ask him to split more before the snow deepens. The first true storm is rarely the worst. It's the later ones, when supplies are already stretched, that test a settlement's mettle. From there, you walk toward the northern traps with the hunters. The frost underfoot snaps softly with each step, and your breath drifts in white ribbons behind you. You talk as you walk, not about the weather or idle gossip, but about the condition of the game, trails, the signs of fox or hare, the state of the trap springs. One of the hunters, a younger man named Victor, mentions he's seen wolf tracks closer to the village than usual. You nod gravely. It's a reminder that efficiency here isn't only about making the village productive, it's also about keeping it safe. At the first snare line, you find a pair of hares, one still warm. The hunters work quickly, resetting the traps before moving to the next site. You crouch to check the tension of a bent sapling trap. The cord is fraying. You replace it with a fresh length of hemp, tying the knot with care. It's a small task, but one that could mean the difference between an empty snare and a full pot tomorrow. Back in the village, you stop by the pigsty. The structure is sound, the rails tight. The pigs root lazily in the straw, snuffling for scraps. You scatter a few handfuls of grain, watching them grunt in satisfaction. Soon you'll need to arrange for extra feed to carry them through winter, but for now, they're content. Livestock are as much a responsibility as they are an asset. Efficient management means never forgetting either side of that ledger. You make your way toward the garden now, mostly bare. Only a few hardy herbs cling to life in the cold earth, sage, thyme, a bit of parsley. You kneel to pinch off some leaves, knowing they'll brighten tonight's stew. The women tending the last beds greet you warmly, and you ask after their stores of preserved vegetables. They assure you the barrels in storage are full cabbages layered with salt beets packed in sand carrots buried in straw. This is good. A well-fed village is a calm village. Mid-morning finds you at the workshop where André the smith is hammering out nails. Sparks dance in the dim light, the clang of iron against iron ringing sharp. You discuss the hinges needed for a new storage chest, and he promises to have them ready in 2 days. You take a moment to inspect the tools hanging on the wall, hammers, chisels, saws. Any that look worn will be sharpened or repaired before the month ends. There's no room for a broken tool in the middle of a crisis. Leaving the workshop, you pause at the well. The new rope remains strong, the pulley still smooth. You lower a bucket, watching the ripples spread across the water's dark surface. The bucket comes up full and cold. You take a sip, the chill biting at your teeth, then set it aside for the day's cooking. Clean water is so commonplace now that it's easy to forget. It's a cornerstone of your village's survival. By midday, the sun hovers low but bright, gilding the frost and making the cottages glow faintly golden. You take a short break in your own cottage, sipping warm broth while making notes on a scrap of parchment. You jot down wood levels, grain counts, game tallies. These are not idle records. They are the map by which you steer the settlement. You know exactly how much you can spare and how much you must guard fiercely. The afternoon is for maintenance. You walk the fence line with a coil of rope and a small axe tightening loose rails, replacing stakes where frost has shifted them. You pause at the granary to check the thatch again. A few strands have loosened in the wind. You weave them back into place, your fingers stiff from the cold. Each act feels small, almost trivial, but you've seen what happens when such details are ignored. Near the end of the lane, you find Tomasz hauling a sled of firewood. His breath comes in heavy puffs, his cheeks ruddy with the effort. You walk beside him for a stretch, asking about his progress on the stone clearing. He admits the ground is hardening faster than he thought. You suggest focusing on the stones nearest the plow lines. In spring, those will matter most. Efficiency is also about choosing where not to spend energy. As dusk begins to draw its long fingers across the sky, the hunters return with a modest haul, another pair of hares, a brace of grouse. The meat will be skinned and smoked before the night is out. You stand in the square as the villagers filter in from their day's work, each carrying the mark of labor, mud on boots, wood dust on sleeves, wind-burned faces. You greet each one, acknowledging their efforts. A leader's thanks costs nothing, yet it yields much. The evening meal is hearty tonight. Stew thick with root vegetables, bread still warm from Marta's oven, a small plate of smoked fish. The scent fills the square, drawing the villagers together in a loose circle around the fire. They eat, talk, and share news of the day, who saw fresh deer tracks, which trap line was most fruitful, whose roof needs mending before the next snow. You listen more than you speak, letting their words fill the spaces between your thoughts. After the meal, you make one final circuit. The pigsty is secure, the henhouse latched, the woodpile covered. A faint wind stirs the frost-rimmed grass, carrying with it the scent of snow. You linger a moment at the village edge, looking out at the dark line of the forest. It seems to breathe in the cold, waiting. Back in your cottage, you set another log on the fire and settle into your chair. The flames throw warm light across the walls, the shadows shifting gently with every flicker. You close your eyes for a moment, listening to the muted sounds of the village at rest, low voices, a door closing, the crunch of boots on frozen ground. These are the sounds of a place that for tonight is whole. You know the work will never truly end. But here in the quiet glow of the hearth, you can feel the shape of what you've built, a rhythm of labor and rest, preparation and reward, vigilance and trust. Efficiency is not a single act, but a way of being a steady hand, guiding the wheel as the seasons turn. The morning comes gray and wind-brushed, the sky low and heavy with the promise of snow. You wake to the sound of that wind sighing through the eaves, the faint creak of timbers as the cold settles into them. Pulling on your cloak, you step out into the chill, your breath curling like smoke into the dim air. Somewhere in the distance, a raven calls, once hoarse deliberate, before the wind swallows the sound. Today will be a day for tightening every seam, shoring up every weak point. You can feel it in your bones, the season's first real snow is close. And once it falls, the world will change not forever, but long enough that anything left undone now will be harder to fix later. You head to the woodpile first. Jakub has been tireless, and the stack stands higher than ever, but the wind can still scatter loose bark and sawdust. You check the covering, securing it with a few extra stones along the edges. The smell of resin and cut pine clings to your gloves. Firewood is winter's lifeline, and you've learned to treat it with reverence. From there, yet you walk to the granary. The thatch roof still sits tight from your last repairs, but you test the bindings anyway, tugging each one. Frost has stiffened the fibers, but they hold. Inside, you check the grain bins, dry, full, and free of pests. You run your hand over the tops, feeling the coarse texture of rye and barley beneath the cloth coverings. Each bin is more than food. It's a measure of how many days you can meet the winter with confidence. The hunters are already in the square, fastening cloaks and checking bows. You speak with them briefly, advising them to set snares closer to the village until the snow deepens enough to track larger game. The forest is no place to wander far when the weather can turn in minutes. They nod, adjusting their plans without complaint. By mid-morning, the wind grows sharper, cutting through layers of wool. You find Tomasz near the north field, hauling the last stones to the pile by the fence. His breath hangs thick in the cold, and his gloves are stiff with frost. You walk with him to the storage shed, where the stones will be kept for later use in building or repairs. The rhythm of walking together keeps his pace steady, and you know he'll finish the task before the light fades. From the field, you make for the henhouse. The birds huddle inside, restless but warm. You scatter grain, checking their water trough for ice. A thin sheet has already formed, so you break it and refill the trough with fresh water from the bucket you carried. The hens cluck softly in appreciation, or perhaps in complaint, but either way, they'll be fed and watered for the day. At the workshop, Andrzej is shaping a new door latch for the fodder shed. The iron sings under his hammer, each blow precise. You talk over the sound about the need for extra hinges before the snow comes. The cold can warp wood and strain weak joints. He promises to have them ready by tomorrow. Efficiency, you've found, is often about asking for what you'll need a day or two before you actually need it. Passing the well, you stop to check the rope and pulley once more. The rope remains strong, but the wind has begun to lift tiny flakes of frost from the bucket's rim. You brush them away, knowing they'll be back in minutes. You can't stop winter, but you can keep it from creeping in faster than necessary. The hunters return earlier than expected, bringing with them a brace of rabbits and a pheasant. They've chosen caution over greed, returning before the wind worsens. You praise their judgment. It's as valuable as any catch. The meat is taken to be dressed and smoked, a quiet insurance policy against leaner days. After a quick meal of bread and warm broth, you turn your attention to the new fodder shed. The frame is complete, the roof well fitted, but the doors still hang open. You help fit them to the hinges. Andrzej finished yesterday testing their swing. They close smoothly, and when barred will keep out both weather and curious animals. You step back satisfied. Another small fortress against the season's hunger. In the afternoon, the wind begins to carry fine grains of snow, more a warning than a true fall, but enough to set your mind racing through the list of last tasks. You check the pigsty, making sure the bedding straw is thick and dry. The pigs grunt lazily, rooting in their feed. You linger a moment watching their steady movements. Animals don't worry about storms. They simply eat and sleep and trust you to keep the world safe around them. At the fence line, you notice a section where frost has lifted the ground beneath a post. You dig it in deeper, stamping the earth back into place. The work is quick but cold. Your fingers stiff even through gloves. When you're done, you test the post with a firm shove. It holds. You stop at Marta's cottage next. She's inside sewing patches onto wool cloaks. She tells you she's nearly out of the strong linen thread again. You think of the merchant who sometimes passes before the snow closes the roads. If he appears tomorrow, you'll trade for more thread, and perhaps for salt and lamp oil as well. Efficiency means not just looking inward at what you have, but outward at what you can still bring in before the gates of winter close. Toward evening, the snow grows thicker, carried in dancing swirls by the wind. The hunter's snares will be buried by morning, but that's tomorrow's work. Tonight your focus is on closing the day well. You gather the villagers briefly in the square, your voice carrying over the hiss of the wind. You review the day's work, the woodpile secured, the fodder shed, finished, the grain checked, and outline the plan for tomorrow. Keep to the village, tend to the animals. Watch for signs of a heavier storm. Afterward, you walk the perimeter, the snow settling into your hair and beard. The village glows faintly through the swirling white each window, a small promise of warmth. You pause at the far edge, listening to the muffled quiet that comes with falling snow. It's a sound like no other, soft, layered, almost like the world holding its breath. Back inside your cottage, you shake off the snow and settle by the fire. The flames crackle low, casting a warm glow over the room. You stretch your legs toward the hearth, letting the heat seep into your boots. Outside, the wind hums in the chimney, a reminder of the cold pressing at the walls. But here, within the circle of your care, the village is ready. Not finished, never finished, but ready for what's coming. The snow may fall all night. It may even keep falling tomorrow. But your work today means that when you step outside in the morning, you'll face it with a measure of calm. And in a place like this, calm is a kind of wealth, one you've earned, one you'll guard, one you'll spend wisely in the days ahead. You wake to silence, the kind of deep, muffled quiet that only follows a night of heavy snow. For a moment, you lie still, wrapped in the warmth of your wool blanket, listening. There's no rooster crowing, no creak of cartwheels, no voices drifting through the cold air. The world outside is paused, tucked under a thick quilt of white. When you finally step outside, the snow greets you in a slow-motion sparkle light, drifting down through a sky the color of pewter. It's deep enough already to swallow the tops of your boots. The village looks transformed, every roof softened, every fence rounded, every path vanished beneath smooth, untouched drifts. You take a moment to just stand there, watching your breath rise and vanish into the cold. Snow days are their own kind of work. Not the field labor of warmer months, but the hidden labor of keeping warmth in and cold out, of keeping the routines alive when the world tries to smother them. Your first stop is the woodpile. The covering has held, but a light crust of snow clings to the top. You brush it off, lifting the oiled cloth to check the logs beneath. Dry, thank the gods. You carry a load to your cottage, the wood thumping solidly into the rack beside your hearth. Next, you walk to the granary, breaking a fresh path through the drifts. Your boots sink deep, and each step crunches softly. The latch is frozen, but a firm tug frees it. Inside, the air is still and cold, the bins untouched. The grain is safe. You close the door quickly, latching it again to keep the frost at bay. Every moment it stays shut is another moment your stores stay dry. The hunters are already gathered in the square, hoods pulled low, cloaks dusted white. They've decided not to venture far today. Snow this deep makes for slow travel and quick exhaustion. Instead, they'll check only the nearest traps and spend the rest of the day repairing gear. You approve. Survival in winter is as much about pacing as it is about effort. Marta passes by with a bucket heading for the well. You walk with her, keeping an eye out for slippery patches. At the well, the pulley groans slightly in the cold, but the rope holds. The water rises clear and cold, steaming faintly in the frigid air. She thanks you as she carries it back toward her cottage, her breath puffing in small clouds. At the henhouse, the birds are restless, shifting on their perches. You scatter grain and break the thin ice on their water trough. They settle after a few minutes, clucking softly. The pigs are much the same still in their bedding straw, snuffling as you toss in fresh feed. Their pen is sheltered enough that snow hasn't drifted inside, but you pack the edges higher, just in case the wind changes. By mid-morning, you're sweating beneath your cloak despite the cold. Snow shoveling has that effect. You've cleared paths between the key buildings, your cottage, the granary, the henhouse, the workshop, the well. They're narrow tracks, just enough for one person to pass, but they'll keep the village moving through the day. You pause to rest by the fire pit in the square, watching flakes melt on your gloves. The workshop is warm when you step inside thanks to Andre's forge. He's repairing a trap spring, his hands sure, despite the cold that seeps into the corners of the room. You talk about making a few new hinges for the henhouse before the cold warps the wood. He grins, saying he's already started. Efficiency is contagious when people see it in action. Tomasz arrives with a bundle of kindling, stomping the snow from his boots. He's in good spirits, talking about the sled he'll use to haul larger logs once the path to the forest is clearer. You suggest pairing with Jakub tomorrow to split the load, one to fell, one to haul. Tomasz nods, liking the idea. Collaboration saves time and effort, especially when snow turns every trip into a trial. By midday, the sky has lightened a little, the snow easing to a faint flurry. You take advantage of the lull to check the fence line. It's mostly buried now, only the tops of the rails peeking through. In some places, drifts have piled higher than the fence itself. You stamp down these mounds to keep animals from wandering over. It's slow, cold work, but you've seen how a curious deer or a hungry fox can follow such a path right into the heart of the village. In the afternoon, you help Marta carry baskets of mended clothes to storage. Wool cloaks, patched tunics, thick socks, each piece will be precious before winter loosens its grip. She shows you a particularly well-patched cloak, proud of her work. You tell her it's the kind of garment that might see another decade of use, and her eyes brighten. Recognition fuels as much productivity as discipline. The hunters return with modest success, a single hare and a squirrel, but also a set of traps in better condition than yesterday. They settle in at the workshop to mend broken snare lines and sharpen arrow points. You check in briefly, offering to help twist fresh cord from the spare hemp. It's tedious work, but your hand finds the rhythm quickly. As daylight begins to fade, you make your last round of the day. The pigs are fed, the hens secure the woodpile, covered the paths clear enough for tomorrow. You notice the snow has settled into a soft crust, reflecting the faint orange of the setting sun. For a moment, the whole village glows. The evening meal is humble but filling root vegetable stew, thickened with grain, a heel of bread, and a mug of warm ale. You eat with the others around the fire, listening to the crackle of logs and the murmur of quiet conversation. There's less laughter tonight. Cold seems to draw it inward, but there's contentment in the air, the kind that comes from a day well managed. After supper, you step outside once more. The snow has stopped, leaving the sky clear and dark. Stars burn sharp overhead, their light caught in the crystalline surface of the snow. Your breath hangs in the stillness, and for a moment, you let yourself simply stand there, the cold pressing in, but not yet biting. You think about the days ahead. The snow will not melt soon. Travel will be harder food, harder to come by. But the village is ready in the ways that matter. The stores are safe, the people warm, the work steady. You've built not just a settlement, but a rhythm that can withstand the weight of winter. Back in your cottage, you add another log to the fire and settle into your chair. The flames lick the air in slow, graceful movements, casting shadows along the walls. You feel the ache in your shoulders, the stiffness in your knees, but also the quiet satisfaction of knowing that for tonight nothing is urgent. The snow will wait. The cold will wait. And in this moment, you have done what needed doing. Morning arrives in a pale wash of silver light filtering through the frost-rimmed window like a soft lantern glow. The fire in your hearth has burned low, leaving only a faint bed of embers. You stir them to life with the poker, the sparks floating up lazily before settling back into the coals. A fresh log hisses faintly as it catches, filling the room with the comforting scent of pine resin. You step outside into air so cold it almost stings your teeth when you breathe. The snow has settled overnight, packed firm under its own weight. The paths you cleared yesterday still hold, though a thin veil of drifted powder softens their edges. Overhead, the sky is a delicate blue, the kind that promises a clear day, but no real warmth. Your first stop is the woodpile. The covering still holds fast, the logs beneath dry and ready. You haul a sled load toward the square, stacking it beside the communal pile for anyone whose own supply is running low. In a small village, efficiency isn't just about your own readiness. It's about making sure no one else falls behind, because a single weak link can strain the whole chain. You check on the granary next. The latch is stiff from frost, but a sharp tug frees it. Inside the bins are still full, their cloth covers undisturbed. You run your fingers over the stored grain, reassured by its dry, cool feel. You make a quick tally in your mind. At the current pace, you'll have enough to see you through late winter, though it will be tight if the snow lingers into spring. At the hen house, the birds are already awake, shifting and clucking. You break the ice in their trough and scatter grain in measured handfuls, watching them peck busily. In the pigsty, the animals are buried deep in their straw bedding. You add more to the pile, knowing that extra warmth now will save feed later. Animals burn less energy when they're not shivering through the night. Jakub greets you with the square axe over his shoulder. The snow has made his trips to the forest harder, but he's determined to keep the woodpile growing. You suggest working in pairs, he and Tomasz, so one can haul while the other splits. The idea earns you a wry smile. He knows you're right, even if it means sharing the workload. Mid-morning, you head to the workshop. Andrzej is there as always, a small forge fire casting orange light across his lined face. He's repairing a hinge for the hen house, shaping the iron with patient blows. You check the progress, pleased to see the work nearly done. He mentions that a few of the trap springs are wearing thin. You tell him to prioritize those. A broken spring in winter is wasted effort, and in this season, effort is precious. You decide to walk the nearest trap line with the hunters. The snow crunches softly underfoot. As you move through the trees, the world hushed, except for the occasional creak of a shifting branch. The first few traps are empty, the bait untouched. Farther along, you find a rabbit caught cleanly. It's quickly dispatched and added to the bag. The hunters reset the snare with fresh bait, their fingers quick and practiced despite the cold. Efficiency here is in speed. Less time fiddling with knots means less time for cold to steal the feeling from your hands. By midday, you're back in the village, the sun casting sharp shadows across the snow. You take a moment to warm yourself by the fire pit, cupping your hands around a mug of hot broth. Around you, the village hums with a muted rhythm, Marta mending clothes by her window, Tomasz hauling logs, Jakub splitting them, Andrzej hammering in the workshop. No one rushes, but no one lingers idle either. The afternoon is for repairs. You help Jakub strengthen the frame of the sled he and Tomasz will use, tightening the lashings and reinforcing weak joints. You check the bindings on the granary door, oiling them lightly to keep the frost from locking them shut. Small, preventative acts, none dramatic, all essential. Later, you stop at Marta's cottage to check her supply of thread. She's running low again, the spools nearly bare. You make a mental note to set aside flax for spinning once the thaw comes. For now, she'll make do by retwisting scraps into usable lengths. Resourcefulness is its own form of efficiency, and Marta has it in spades. As dusk begins to creep in, the hunters return. Their haul is modest, another rabbit, a pheasant, and a pair of squirrels. The meat will be cleaned and smoked tonight. You thank them for their work, noting which traps need mending before the next outing. You gather the villagers in the square, briefly reviewing the day's work and setting the next day's tasks. Jakub and Tomasz will begin hauling logs from the forest in pairs. Andrzej will finish the trap repairs. Marta will focus on patching the last of the winter cloaks. Clear assignments mean no one wakes tomorrow unsure of their purpose. After the meeting, you walk the perimeter of the village. The snow reflects the fading light, turning the world into shades of silver and blue. You check the fence for any gaps where drifts have piled high enough for animals to cross. You stamp these down your boots, crunching deep into the crusted snow. The evening meal is simple but hearty grain porridge sweetened with dried berries, thick slices of bread, a small portion of smoked meat. The warmth from the food seeps into your limbs, making you feel heavier, slower but content. Around the fire, conversation drifts in low tones, plans for tomorrow, quiet jokes, the occasional burst of laughter. Afterward, you step outside one last time. The night is clear, the stars sharp against the black sky. The air is so cold it feels almost metallic in your lungs. You stand there for a while looking over the snow-covered village, each cottage glowing softly from within. It's a picture of quiet resilience, a reminder of what you've been working to protect. Back inside, you feed the fire one last log and settle into your chair. The crackle of flames blends with the soft sigh of wind at the window. You think of the tasks still ahead, the weeks yet to come, but for tonight, you allow yourself the comfort of knowing the village is steady. In this deep winter quiet, that steadiness is the truest form of wealth you could ask for. You wake before dawn to the faint sound of snow shifting on the roof, sliding in slow sheets to thump softly into the drifts below. The air inside your cottage is cool, the fire having burned low in the night. You stir the embers until they glow, feeding them a few thin sticks before laying on a thicker log. The flames rise reluctantly, stretching toward the low ceiling beams. When you step outside, the world feels muffled, almost weightless. Snow has fallen again overnight, just enough to blur the edges of the paths you cleared yesterday. You can still see their gentle dips and rises under the fresh powder, but they will need clearing before the day is out. Overhead, the sky is a pale wash of gray, promising more to come. You begin with the woodpile. The covering has sagged slightly under the new snow, so you shake it free, the powder cascading in a glittering sheet to the ground. The logs underneath are dry and solid. You stack another armload in your cottage before setting off toward the granary. The latch is stiff again, frozen into its slot, but a sharp tap with your glove loosens it. Inside the bins sit like silent sentinels, full dry, untouched. You run a hand across the top layer of grain, feeling its cool, dry weight. It's not a bottomless supply, but it's steady, and that steadiness is what keeps your mind at ease. At the henhouse, the birds greet you with soft clucks. You break the ice on their water trough and scatter feed in careful handfuls. The pigs, still warm in their bedding, rouse enough to grunt when you toss in fresh straw. They settle again quickly, unconcerned with the cold, so long as they have food and warmth. In the square, you meet Yakub and Tomasz. They've already decided to start the day with a run to the forest for more wood. You remind them to work together, Yakub to fell and split Tomasz to haul. The snow will make every trip heavier, but 2 sets of hands will keep the work from dragging into exhaustion. Marta joins you next, arms full of folded cloaks. She's finished patching the last of the winter gear. You help her carry the pile to the storage chest, tucking the garments inside where they'll stay dry. She tells you she's running low on flax scraps for mending, but you both know that will have to wait for spring. Until then, she'll make do with what she has. Mid-morning finds you at the workshop. Andrzej is hunched over his bench, shaping new trap springs. He works with quiet focus, the metal gleaming in the light of the forge. You talk briefly about setting aside time to repair the hinges on the fodder shed door. He agrees, saying the cold has made the wood swell slightly, making the doors harder to close. The hunters arrive, stamping snow from their boots. They plan to check the nearest traps, only anything farther is buried too deep. You join them for the short walk into the trees, your boots sinking into the untouched snow with each step. The first few traps are empty, their loops frosted stiff. Farther along, you find a squirrel, its fur dusted with snow. The hunters reset the trap quickly, fingers deft, despite the chill. Back in the village, the wind picks up, blowing fine grains of snow into your face. You stop at the fence line, checking where drifts have piled high. In one place, the snow nearly reaches the top rail. You stamp it down, packing it solid so no animal can use it as a ramp into the village. These quiet battles with the snow are constant in winter. You never win for long, but you fight anyway. By midday, Yakub and Tomasz return from the forest with a sled piled high with logs. Their faces are red from the cold, but they're in good spirits. You help them stack the wood beside the communal pile, then send them inside to warm themselves with hot broth. Pushing too hard now only means slower work tomorrow. The afternoon is spent on repairs. You work with Andrzej to adjust the fodder shed doors, shaving a thin sliver from the swollen wood so they close more easily. The smell of fresh-cut pine mixes with the cold air, sharp and clean. When you're done, the doors swing shut smoothly, the bar dropping into place with a satisfying thud. Later, you walk the paths again, clearing the light snow that's fallen since morning. It's easier work than yesterday, but still enough to warm you through. As you pass the henhouse, you check the latch, making sure frost hasn't frozen it shut. A frozen latch could mean a missed feeding, and in winter, even a day without food weakens the flock. The hunters return with modest success, another rabbit and 2 squirrels. It's not much, but every bit adds to the stores. You watch as the meat is cleaned and set to smoke, the smell mingling with the tang of cold air. As the light begins to fade, you gather the villagers briefly. You review the day's work, wood-hauled repairs, made paths cleared, and outline tomorrow's plans. The forecast is for colder weather, so you'll keep most tasks within the village. The hunters will check traps close by Yakub, and Tomasz will focus on splitting the new logs. and Marta will begin weaving strips of cloth into new bedding for the animals. After the meeting, you make your final round. The pigs are settled, the hens roosting, the woodpile covered. The granary door is latched, the fence drifts stamped down. The village is ready for another night. Dinner is simple tonight, stew thickened with grain, a slice of bread, and a mug of warm ale. Around the fire, conversation drifts in quiet currents. The cold has a way of making voices softer, as though everyone instinctively saves their strength for the days ahead. After the meal, you step outside. The snow has stopped for now, leaving the sky clear and bright with stars. Your breath hangs in the stillness, the cold biting at your cheeks. The village lies quiet beneath its blanket of snow, every roof catching the faint silver light. Back in your cottage, you feed the fire another log and settle into your chair. The warmth seeps slowly into your bones, easing the stiffness from the day's work. Outside, the night deepens the cold, sharpening in the darkness. You think about tomorrow, about the rhythm of tasks and checks and quiet vigilance. Efficiency here is not about rushing. It's about keeping the pattern unbroken day after day until spring returns. And for tonight, the pattern holds. The fire in your hearth has burned low again, leaving only a faint red glow among the ashes. You rouse it with the poker, coaxing the embers until they flicker, then feed in thin sticks of kindling. The wood catches, slowly filling the cottage with the soft pop and hiss of warming sap. You dress quickly, wool tunic, heavy cloak, gloves, stiff with yesterday's frost, and step outside into air so crisp it feels brittle. The snow underfoot crunches in a deeper register today, a sign that the cold has settled hard into the drifts. Overhead, the sky is a pale, washed-out blue, streaked with thin clouds. There's no wind, but the stillness has a kind of weight to it, as though the land itself is holding its breath. You start at the woodpile. The covering has held, but frost crystals feather along its edges, catching the morning light. You pull it back enough to stack a fresh armload into your cottage before covering it again. You've learned that every trip to the woodpile is easier when it's done before you truly need it. From there, you cross to the granary. The latch lifts without a fight this morning, the cold having spared it from freezing shut. Inside the bins are as you left them, full dry, unmarked by rodent or damp. You breathe out slowly, the cloud of your breath mingling with the faint scent of stored grain. It's a simple ritual check, confirm close, but it's one of the invisible threads holding the village together. At the henhouse, the birds stir as you open the door, their feathers fluffed against the chill. You scatter grain in measured handfuls, listening to the soft patter of beaks against the wooden trough. The water is frozen over again, the ice thinner than yesterday, but still needing a firm crack. You break it and pour in fresh water from your bucket, watching the steam curl faintly into the air. The pigs greet you with quiet grunts as you step into the pen. Their breath hangs thick in the cold air as they shuffle toward the feed trough. You top it up and spread a fresh layer of straw, the golden strands bright against the gray of winter. They settle back into the bedding with satisfied snuffles, their trust in you as simple and complete as the snow's trust in the cold. In the square, you find Jakub and Tomasz already at work. They've begun splitting the logs hauled yesterday, the steady thunk of the axe carrying across the frost-hushed village. You watch for a moment, noting the rhythm of their work. Jakub's clean swings, Tomasz's quick stacking. Together they're faster than either could be alone, and you make a mental note to keep them paired for the rest of winter. Marta appears soon after carrying a bundle of old linen scraps. She plans to weave them into bedding strips for the animals. You help her carry them to the workshop, where Andraze is already at his bench, sharpening the teeth of a saw. The smell of metal filings and warm forge air mixes with the faint scent of wool from Marta's bundle. It's a reminder that in winter, the workshop becomes as central as the fields once were. Here, repairs and small crafts take the place of planting and harvesting. Mid-morning, the hunters gather for their daily round. The snow is too deep for long treks, so they focus on the nearest trap lines. You walk with them to the edge of the forest, the sunlight scattering across the drifts in dazzling patches. The first trap holds nothing. The bait is gone, likely stolen by a clever crow. The second yields a rabbit quickly dispatched and added to the bag. The third is frozen solid, the mechanism locked in a sheath of ice. You help free it, your gloves sticking briefly to the cold metal. The trap is reset, and you turn back toward the village, the snow crunching softly with each step. By midday, the sun has warmed the air just enough to make the snow's surface glisten. You take a moment to stand in the square, watching the life of the village unfold. Jakub and Tomasz still work at the woodpile, their breath rising in short, steady bursts. Marta sits near the workshop door, weaving her linen strips with patient hands. Andrzej's hammer rings inside, a steady heartbeat against the winter quiet. The hunters return their modest catch slung at their sides. You help dress the game in the shade behind the food store, the air sharp with the scent of fresh meat. The carcasses are cleaned, the hides set aside for later use, the meat hung in the smoking shed. It's a small addition to the stores, but in winter, small additions matter. The afternoon is given to repairs. You work with Andrzej to replace the worn hinges on the henhouse door. The cold has stiffened the wood, making the old hinges strain. The new ones swing smoothly once fixed, and you oil them lightly to slow the frost's bite. From there, you move to the fence line, stamping down drifts, where the snow has piled high enough to challenge the barrier. Marta joins you for a short walk to check the storage sheds. She's thinking ahead to spring, already talking about the flax she'll spin once the thaw comes. You listen, letting her voice carry some of the weight of the cold. Even in winter, plans for warmer days keep morale steady. As the light begins to fade, you gather the villagers briefly in the square. You praise the day's work, the stacked wood, the mended bedding, the repaired hinges, and lay out tomorrow's tasks. The hunters will check the traps again. Jakub and Tomasz will continue splitting logs, Marta will finish the bedding strips, and Andrzej will work on a set of new hinges for the granary. The evening meal is a quiet one. Thick stew, coarse bread, a small cup of ale. Around the fire, the villagers speak softly, their voices low and measured. There's no need for long conversations tonight, just the steady comfort of shared warmth and food. After the meal, you step outside. The sky is deepening into a blue so dark, it's almost black, the first stars pricking through. The snow reflects the last light of day, casting a pale glow across the village. You walk the perimeter one last time, checking doors, latches, and the woodpile cover. Everything is in order. Back in your cottage, you add another log to the fire and sink into your chair. The heat begins to seep into your bones, loosening the stiffness from your joints. You think about the quiet victories of the day, the hinges that won't freeze shut the bedding, that will keep the animals warm, the small but steady addition to the food stores. In a place like this, efficiency isn't about grand achievements. It's about the little things done well, done early, done every day. That's what keeps the village whole through the long winter. And tonight, as the firelight flickers across the walls, You know the pattern is holding. The cold wakes you before the light does. It's the kind of cold that makes the inside of your nose sting when you breathe too deeply. You sit up slowly, the wool blanket sliding from your shoulders, and for a moment, you just listen. The fire has burned down to ash, and the silence outside is thick enough to feel like another layer of snow. You rebuild the fire carefully, first kindling, then split sticks, then a heavier log. The flames spread slowly, casting long shadows against the wooden walls. As the warmth returns, you pull on your tunic cloak and gloves, the fabric stiff from yesterday's frost. Stepping outside is like walking into a breath you didn't know you were holding. The air is so still that every sound carries the soft crunch of your boots, the distant creak of a tree in the cold, the muffled cluck from the henhouse. Above the sky is pale and clear, the kind of winter blue that seems carved from glass. You head first to the woodpile. The cover is still tight, the logs dry. You bring in enough to last the day before covering it again. You've learned that in weather like this, small trips are better. Keep the load light. Keep your steps steady, and never work so hard in the morning that you've got nothing left by night. The granary latch resists you this morning, a thin sheen of ice sealing it shut. You chip at it gently with the butt of your glove until it cracks free. Inside the bins sit untouched, the grain cool and dry. You linger just long enough to check each cover, making sure the cloth seals are snug against the edges. Any gap, however small, is an invitation to trouble mice, damp or worse. At the henhouse, you find the door frozen into its frame. You press your weight into it until the ice gives the latch creaking as it swings open. The hens stir, blinking in the pale light. You break the ice in their water trough, scatter feed, and check the perches for any signs of frostbite on their feet. The pigs are easier, still warm in their straw beds. They rise with sleepy grunts at the sound of grain hitting the trough. You take a moment to watch them eat, their steady chewing, a kind of reassurance. In the square, Jakub and Tomasz are already working at the woodpile, the air ringing with the sharp crack of splitting logs. You greet them, noting the pace of their work. They've found a rhythm now, Jakub splitting. Tomasz stacking that keeps them moving without wearing out too quickly. You suggest taking turns hauling smaller loads to the sheds of older villagers. Strength is best spent where it strengthens the whole. Marta appears with a basket of woven strips, the bedding for the animals nearly complete. She asks if there's enough straw to fill the loft in the fodder shed. You check together, counting the bales. It will be enough if you ration carefully. Efficiency isn't just about gathering resources, it's about using them with foresight. Mid-morning, you walk with the hunters to the edge of the forest. The snow is deep, the air still, the world muffled under its white weight. The first traps yield nothing, but at the third you find a rabbit cleanly caught. It's dispatched quickly, the trap reset with fresh bait. Another holds a squirrel, its fur dusted with frost. These small catches will keep meat in the stores and hides for repairs or trade. Back in the village, you stop by the workshop. Andrzej is at the bench, working a strip of iron into a hinge for the granary. The heat from the forge is a relief after the forest chill. You talk about setting aside time for tool maintenance tomorrow. Axes, knives, and saws. All need sharpening before the metal turns brittle in the cold. By midday, the sun hangs low, casting long shadows across the snow. You take a short rest in your cottage, sipping hot broth while reviewing your mental list. Wood steady, grain steady, water steady, meat growing but slowly, repairs progressing. The village's rhythm is holding, but winter's weight always presses harder as the days wear on. In the afternoon, you help Marta lay the new bedding in the animal pens. The hens fluff into it immediately, scratching and settling. The pigs burrow down until only their ears and snouts are visible. Warm animals eat less, and less feed means more for the days ahead. It's a quiet victory, but you count it just the same. From there, you walk the fence line again. The snow drifts are higher now, some brushing the lower rails. You stamp them down where you can, marking the worst spots for later shoring. In winter, the line between secure and breached can be just a single night's snowfall. Tomasz joins you as you finish carrying an armload of kindling for the food store. He mentions a patch of ice forming near the well. You walk there together, chipping it away before it becomes a hazard. Small dangers left alone become big ones faster than most people realize. As dusk approaches, the hunters return. 2 rabbits and another squirrel, not a feast, but enough to keep the stores moving in the right direction. You help hang the meat in the smoking shed, the scent of wood smoke and fresh game mingling in the cold air. Before supper, you gather the villagers briefly in the square. You praise the bedding work, the steady flow of wood, the modest hunt. Tomorrow's focus will be on tool maintenance, checking every hinge and latch, and another round of fence stamping. No one groans. They've settled into the rhythm now, understanding that these daily acts are what carry a village through winter. The evening meal is humble grain porridge bread, a strip of smoked meat, but eaten together it feels like more. Around the fire, the talk is soft, punctuated by short bursts of laughter. The heat seeps into your bones, chasing away the day's chill. Afterward, you step outside. The first stars are already out, sharp and bright against the darkening sky. The snow glows faintly in their light, the village lying quiet beneath its white blanket. You make one last walk along the perimeter, checking doors and latches, stamping down the highest drifts. Back inside, you feed the fire another log and settle into your chair. The warmth wraps around you, the crackle of flames blending with the faint sigh of wind outside. You think of the day's work, not dramatic but necessary, not urgent but constant. This is the heart of efficient management in winter, doing the right small things every single day until the thaw comes. And tonight, the pattern still holds. The morning breaks in slow shades of silver, the horizon pale and cold as the inside of a pewter cup. You wake to the faint creak of the timbers above you and the soft rasp of the wind moving snow against the walls. The fire in your hearth has burned low, just a scatter of faintly glowing coals beneath the ash. You coax it to life with careful hands, feeding it thin strips of wood until the flames curl upward again. Stepping outside is like stepping into a hushed cathedral made of ice. The air is perfectly still, the snow untouched since last night's fall. Every rooftop is softened under a clean white layer, and the paths you cleared yesterday are faint ghosts beneath the fresh powder. Even your breath seems to hang motionless for a moment before drifting away. You start the morning as always with the woodpile. The covering is iced over, so you knock away the frost before peeling it back. The logs underneath are reassuringly dry. You stack an armload inside your cottage before the cold begins to bite at your fingertips. Each trip like this is a stitch in the fabric of the day, small, essential, easy to overlook, until one is missing. From there, you move to the granary. The latch lifts easily today, the cold dry enough to keep it from freezing. Inside the bins are as you left them, the grain cool and dry under their cloth covers. You run your hand along the edge of one bin, feeling the smooth, worn wood beneath your palm. It's not just food, it's the promise that tomorrow will begin much like today, without hunger at your back. At the henhouse, the birds are slow to rouse their feathers fluffed in the cold. You break the ice on their trough and scatter grain, listening to the faint rustle and peck of beaks against the feed. In the pigsty, the animals grunt lazily, rooting at the fresh straw you lay down. Their breath steams in the air, rising in brief clouds before vanishing. In the square, Yakub and Tomasz are already at work, splitting and stacking logs. Their rhythm is steady, the soft thunk of the axe carrying across the frozen air. You join them briefly to help move a fresh load to the communal pile. They talk little speech, feels like wasted breath in the cold, but their focus is a kind of conversation in itself. Marta arrives with a basket of finished bedding strips ready for the animal pens. You help her carry them to the sheds, laying them down where the hens will scratch and the pigs will nest. She mentions needing to repair one of the grain sacks soon. The stitching is starting to fray. You promise to bring her the sack this afternoon, before the tear worsens. Efficiency is often about catching small wear before it becomes large damage. Mid-morning, the hunters gather cloaks pulled tight. They'll check only the closest trap lines today. The snow is too deep for a longer trek. You walk with them to the edge of the forest. The air is heavy with the scent of pine, the snow under the trees less deep, but still soft and slow to walk through. The first few traps are empty, the bait frozen stiff. Farther along, a rabbit waits in one, its fur blending so well with the snow you almost miss it. It's quickly dispatched and reset. Another trap holds nothing but tracks, perhaps a fox clever enough to take the bait without tripping the snare. Back in the village, you warm your hands by the fire pit in the square. Around you, the day hums in its quiet winter way, wood being split, cloth being mended, traps being repaired in the workshop. Andrzej works at the forge, shaping a new latch for the food store door, the metal glowing orange before yielding to his hammer. You talk briefly about sharpening the hunter's knives tomorrow. Better to do it now than wait for a dull blade to slow the work. By midday, the sky has shifted to a paler shade of blue, the sun a white disk low above the horizon. You take a short break inside your cottage, sipping broth and checking your mental listwood steady. Grain steady, water steady, repairs ongoing. No alarms, no shortages, just the steady hum of a winter day well managed. The afternoon is for small repairs. You fetch the frayed grain sack for Marta, who sits in the warmth of her cottage sewing it with sure, even stitches. You thank her, knowing it will hold for another season now. You help Jakub adjust the sled runners, sanding away the frost-roughened edges so they'll glide more easily over snow. You tighten the binding on the fodder shed door, making sure it will stay snug against the wind. Later, you walk the fence line again. The drifts are high in places, so you stamp them down with the heel of your boot. It's repetitive work, but you've seen how quickly an animal, wild or wandering livestock, can exploit an unnoticed gap. The hunters return with modest success, another rabbit and 2 squirrels. You help them skin and prepare the meat, the hides set aside for later use. The meat goes into the smoking shed, the scent curling into the air as the day leans toward evening. Before supper, you gather the villagers briefly. You praise the steady wood supply, the repaired grain sack, the careful hunting. Tomorrow will be another day of close-to-home work, sharpening tools, mending worn harnesses, checking each hinge and latch again before the next deep freeze. The meal is warm and filling thick barley porridge, a heel of bread, a small portion of smoked meat. Around the fire, the talk is low, but steady bits of news, a shared joke, a quiet nod between friends. The warmth soaks into your bones, making your eyelids heavy. After supper, you make your last walk around the village. The snow reflects the faint starlight, turning the world into a soft landscape of blue and silver. Each door is closed, each latch fastened, each path faint but passable. You stand for a moment at the far edge, looking back at the small cluster of cottages glowing softly in the night. Back inside, you add another log to the fire and settle into your chair. The flames whisper against the wood, casting slow-moving shadows across the walls. You think of the day's work, modest, unremarkable, but absolutely necessary. In winter, efficiency is measured not in bursts of progress, but in the quiet certainty that nothing has been overlooked. And tonight, nothing has. You wake to the faint tapping of ice pellets against the shutters, a sound different from snow, sharper, more brittle. The fire has burned almost completely out the hearth, a bed of ashy gray, with only a few hidden coals glowing deep within. You coax them to life slowly, adding kindling, until the flame curls up again, chasing away the night chill that clings to the walls. When you step outside, you're met with a sky the color of tarnished silver, low and heavy. A thin crust of ice covers the snow, crunching under your boots with each step. The air smells faintly metallic, a sure sign the freeze has deepened overnight. You take a breath, feel it scrape the inside of your throat, and know today will demand careful pacing. Your first stop is the woodpile. The covering is stiff with frost, but it has held. You fold it back to check the logs. Dry solid, their cut ends pale against the winter gray. You carry a smaller load than usual back to your cottage. The ice makes footing treacherous, and there's no sense in rushing. Winter management is as much about avoiding injury as it is about producing results. The granary latch resists you, ice wedged into the small spaces. You chip at it with your glove until the frost gives way. Inside the bins stand steady, the grain unspoiled. You check each cloth cover, pressing them down so the edges are snug. You've learned that on days like this, even a small gap can let in damp that will linger for weeks. At the henhouse, the birds are restless. You break the ice in their trough and scatter grain, watching them peck quickly before retreating back to their perches. The pigs are slower to rise, shifting heavily in their bedding. You add a few more forkfuls of straw, both for insulation and to give them something dry to root through during the day. Their low grunts are muffled by the cold air. In the square, Jakub and Tomasz stand by the woodpile, talking in low voices. You walk over, noting the way the ice crusts the edges of their cloaks. They plan to split wood inside the workshop today rather than risk swinging axes on the slick ground. You agree it's the right call. There's no point in having a full woodpile if one of your best workers is laid up with a twisted ankle. Marta arrives with her sewing basket tucked under one arm. She's been repairing the leather harnesses for the sleds, her hands red and chapped from the cold. You suggest moving her work into the workshop for the day, both for warmth and for company. Work shared is work lightened, even if the tasks remain the same. By mid-morning, the hunters gather. They'll check only the nearest traps, no further than the forest edge. You decide to walk with them. The ice makes every step deliberate, and the trees groan faintly as the wind moves through their frozen branches. The first trap is empty, the bait untouched, likely too cold to tempt anything. The second holds a rabbit stiff and still. It's taken quickly and the snare reset. The third trap is frozen solid, the mechanism locked under a sheet of ice. You work together to free it, fingers numbing despite gloves. Back in the village, you pause by the fire pit, holding your hands over the small blaze until the feeling returns to your fingertips. Around you, the sound of work continues, logs being split inside the workshop. The steady scrape of leather being pulled through a needle, André's hammer striking iron. The rhythm is slower today, but still moving, and that's what matters. By midday, a fine mist begins to fall, freezing on contact with any surface. You decide to bring forward the afternoon checks before the ice worsens. You start with the fodder shed, ensuring the doors close tightly. The hinges creak but hold. You oil them lightly, the metal hissing faintly as the oil meets the cold. Next is the fence line drifts are low now, but the ice makes them slick. You press them down where needed, careful not to lose your footing. At the well, you find the bucket rope stiff and frosted. You work it loose, lowering it slowly to avoid fraying the frozen fibers. The water that comes up is colder than usual, its surface steaming faintly in the frigid air. You take a small sip. It's as clean and crisp as glass. In the workshop, Jakub and Tomasz have built a small pile of freshly split logs, their breath visible even in the forge-warmed air. Marta has set up her sewing at a side bench, the repaired harnesses neatly folded beside her. André is shaping new nails, each one set aside in a growing pile for future repairs. It's a rare sight to have so many of your villagers working in one place, and you linger a moment feeling the quiet unity of it. The hunters return with their modest catch, a rabbit and 2 squirrels. The meat is prepared quickly, the hides hung to dry in the workshop, where the air is warmer. You help with the cleaning, the work going faster with more hands. Even in winter, efficiency is about knowing when to work together instead of separately. As dusk approaches, the ice mist thickens. You call the villagers together briefly, praising their choice to work indoors, the careful hunting, the steady pace despite the cold. Tomorrow will depend on how much ice the night leaves behind. But for now, the plan is to keep repairs and wood splitting inside until the ground is safer. The evening meal is warm and filling stew made richer with a handful of dried herbs, bread toasted by the fire. Around the hearth, the talk is gentle, more murmured than spoken aloud. The ice tapping on the shutters becomes a steady rhythm, like soft drumming at the edges of your world. After supper, you take your last walk through the village. The paths are slick under the thin crust of ice, but your boots find purchase in the old footprints. Every door is closed, every latch fastened, every animal bedded down. The glow from the windows is warmer against the encroaching gray of the ice-laden night. Back in your cottage, you add another log to the fire and sink into your chair. The heat seeps slowly into your fingers, chasing away the lingering chill. You think about the day, how the pace shifted, how choices were made for safety as much as productivity. That's a kind of efficiency, too, knowing when to ease the work so it can continue tomorrow. Outside, the ice falls steadily, sealing the village under its thin, glistening shell. And for now, the pattern still holds. The ice stopped sometime in the night, leaving the village coated in a thin, glassy sheen. You wake to the sound of it cracking gently under the weight of the roof's snow, as the first pale light of morning spreads across the horizon. The fire in your hearth is still holding a whisper of heat, enough to wake it again, with a careful poke and a handful of kindling. The small flames leap up as though relieved to be asked. When you open the door, the air greets you like a frozen blade, sharp, biting, and clean. Every branch, every fence post, Every roof edge is rimmed in clear ice that catches the weak sun, scattering it in shards of light. The snow beneath has hardened into a crust that crunches underfoot with each slow, deliberate step. You take a moment to scan the square. All is still. You head first to the woodpile. The cover is stiff with last night's frost, but the logs beneath are dry and ready. You carry a load to your cottage, your breath rising in short clouds. The path is slick in places, but your boots find enough purchase to keep you upright. Small victories even at dawn. The granary latch opens with less resistance than yesterday. Perhaps the ice broke away in the night. Inside the grain sits steady in its bins, cloth covers still snug. You press your palm to the wood, feeling its cold, solid strength. You close the latch gently. These are the small rituals that keep hunger from creeping in. At the henhouse, the birds are already stirring, shifting on their perches. You break the ice in their trough, the crack echoing faintly in the quiet morning. You scatter grain and watch them settle to eat, the rhythmic pecking, a reassuring sound. The pigs rise slowly in their pen, their breath steaming in the cold air. You add fresh straw, the golden layer bright against the winter gray, and they burrow back into it with satisfied grunts. In the square, Yakub and Tomasz arrive, cloaks dusted white, where the ice fell from overhanging branches. They plan to spend the morning splitting wood in the workshop again. You approve it's warm, safe, and keeps the day's work moving. You suggest stacking a reserve pile inside the food store to save trips in bad weather. They nod, already thinking through how to make space. Marta joins you soon after, a repaired harness draped over her arm. She's pleased with the work. The stitching is tight, the leather supple from a recent oiling. You praise her skill, knowing that even in this frozen landscape, a well-kept harness can mean the difference between a sled arriving full or not arriving at all. By mid-morning, the hunters are ready to check the closest trap lines. You walk with them as far as the forest edge. The ice makes every step deliberate, the frozen crust cracking beneath your boots. The first trap holds nothing, its loop stiff with frost. The second offers a rabbit quickly dispatched and reset. The third, half buried in drifted snow, is frozen solid. It will need to be thawed indoors before it can be used again. Back in the village, you stop at the workshop to warm your hands. The air inside smells of pine sap, leather, and faint wood smoke from the forge. Yakub and Tomasz are stacking neat piles of split logs, their movements slow but steady. Marta is at her bench, trimming loose threads from the repaired harness. Andrzej hammers quietly at a strip of metal shaping nails for future repairs. The room hums with the soft energy of focused work. By midday, the sun hangs low light scattering off the ice in dazzling flashes. You take a short break in your cottage, sipping warm broth and reviewing your mental list. Wood abundant. Grain steady. Repairs progressing. No alarms. No shortages, only the steady maintenance that winter demands. The afternoon is for careful inspection. You walk the fence line, stamping down any drifted snow and checking posts for signs of shifting under the frozen crust. You pause at the fodder shed, adjusting the door bar so it seats more firmly against the frame. At the well, you clear away a thin rime of ice around the base to keep the path safe for anyone fetching water. Near the henhouse, you notice a small crack in the outer wall where the frost has pushed against the wood. It's not urgent, but left alone it could widen. You mark it for repair tomorrow. Efficiency is as much about noticing the tiny changes as it is about reacting to the big ones. As the light begins to fade, the hunters return. 2 rabbits, and a squirrel today, not much, but enough to keep the smoking shed working. You help clean and hang the meat, the scent of wood smoke curling into the early evening air. Before supper, you gather the villagers for a short meeting. You thank them for the steady work repairs, made wood-stacked traps checked, and lay out tomorrow's plan. More of the same, keep to safe paths, work in pairs, and focus on the small tasks that keep the village strong. No one complains. By now, the rhythm of winter is second nature. The meal is simple vegetable stew, bread crisped over the fire, and a small cup of ale. Around the hearth, the talk drifts between small bits of news and the quiet humor of people who know each other's habits too well to need long explanations. The warmth spreads through the room, loosening the stiffness in your shoulders. After supper, you make your final walk. The ice glitters under the pale wash of starlight, the village glowing softly from its scattered windows. Every latch is fastened, every path passable, every corner of your world at rest. Back in your cottage, you add another log to the fire and sink into your chair. The flames bend and sway, casting soft light across the room. You think about the day, not dramatic, but well kept, the kind that makes winter pass without crisis. That is its own quiet triumph. And tonight, the pattern holds steady. The morning greets you with a strange quiet, not the muffled stillness of new snow, nor the brittle hush of ice, but something softer. You push open the door and find the world wrapped in a light, drifting fog. It hangs low over the rooftops, curling between the fence posts, softening the sharp lines winter has carved. The air feels gentler today, though still cold enough to bite if you linger without moving. You begin, as always, with the woodpile. The covering has collected a fine sheen of frost overnight, but it comes away easily under your hands. The logs beneath are dry, their cut ends pale in the muted light. You carry an armload to your cottage, stacking them neatly by the hearth. The warmth inside will last longer for it, and the small act feels like a promise kept to yourself. At the granary, the latch lifts without a struggle. Inside, the bins hold steady, no signs of damp, no hint of pests. You run your hand along the smooth wood, reassured by its solid feel. You close the latch with care, knowing how much of your village's security rests on this one quiet storehouse. The hens are slower than usual to leave their perches, perhaps sensing the fog as a reason to stay close to warmth. You break the ice on their trough scattergrain and watch them settle into their usual pecking rhythm. The pigs greet you with low grunts, their eyes half closed in the dim light. You fork in fresh straw, the golden strands bright against the fog-softened world. In the square, Jakub and Tomasz arrive together, their breath curling in twin streams. They've decided to begin the day hauling some of the indoor split logs into the food store for easier access. You agree it's the right work for such a damp, heavy-aired morning. Together, you clear a safe path through the slick patches and begin the slow process of ferrying the wood inside. Each trip is measured, deliberate. There's no hurry when winter itself moves slowly. Marta joins you soon after, a basket of freshly patched gloves in hand. She distributes them to anyone whose own pair has worn thin. You watch as Tomasz flexes his fingers in his new pair, the leather supple from fresh oiling. Warm hands mean faster work, and faster work means fewer hours exposed to the cold. By mid-morning, the hunters are ready to check their traps. You walk with them as far as the forest edge, the fog folding around the trees in soft columns. The first trap holds nothing, the bait untouched. The second yields a rabbit, its fur damp with frost. The third is empty, but sprung a light dusting of snow clinging to the loop. You reset it carefully, making sure the tension is right before moving on. Returning to the village, you stop at the workshop. Anjay is filing down the edge of a broad knife, the rasp of metal against stone, a steady rhythm in the dim light. You talk briefly about repairing a loose hinge on the fodder shed door. He nods, setting the knife aside to fetch the tools. You follow him to the shed, holding the door steady while he replaces the hinge pin. The door swings smoothly now, its movement easy and quiet. By midday, the fog begins to thin, revealing the pale winter sun as a faint disk above the tree line. You take a short break in your cottage, sipping broth and looking over your mental ledger, wood strong, grain steady, water secure. Repairs complete for now. It's the kind of day when you can feel the weight of the season less pressing against you. The afternoon is for fine-tuning. You check the fence rails again, pressing snow down where drifts have begun to form. You scrape a thin layer of ice from the well's lip, making the bucket path safer for the next person. You visit the